Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Intersection of Science and Christianity. About 2 months ago, I published my first book called The Creator Revealed: A Physicist Examines the Big Bang in the Bible. And a good friend of mine who had read the book said he really wished that I would discuss the book on my YouTube channel, because there are people who would rather listen to a short video than read each chapter. So based on his suggestion, I'm going to spend 20 YouTube videos, and in each of those talk about one of the chapters in the book. The first chapter is called Science and Faith. It's really the prologue, and it describes why I wrote the book. I grew up when humans were going to the moon, and I was always fascinated by science. In addition, I grew up in a Christian home where I was learning that the truth of the Bible should agree with the truth of science. And when I was young, those seemed to go together well. But as I grew older, I found that there were many Christians who thought that science somehow conflicted with the words of the Bible. But if God is a God of truth, then He should speak truth in all the ways He reveals Himself to us. He should speak truth in the Bible, and He should speak truth in the words of nature. And so when I became a graduate student studying experimental particle physics, I decided I should really investigate this subject and see what I believe about how the God of truth reveals Himself in both science and in the Bible. And so I did that. I studied for many, many years and came to what I found was a good synthesis of how the truth of the Bible agrees with the truth we've discovered in nature about the origin and history of the universe. And as I began to study this subject for myself, I also began to share with people what I was learning about how science and Scripture fit together. One of my wife's friends who was homeschooling her child asked me if I had anything I could give her that she could read that described what I believed about science and the Bible. So I gave her some resources, some books by well-known authors that I thought were fairly simple to understand. But despite the fact that she was college educated and a smart woman, she wasn't really able to comprehend and fully understand what these books were saying, even though I thought they were relatively simple and straightforward. And so I decided I need to write something that is straightforward and understandable and enjoyable in a conversational language that would describe why I think the words of Scripture agree with the things we've learned about God, about creation, about origins, by studying the universe. And that's what I've done. This book doesn't break new ground. Well, it might break some new ground. It doesn't break a lot of new ground, but what it does do is it describes things in a brief, enjoyable, conversational way that someone who isn't technically minded would hopefully enjoy and understand and learn things from. But someone who is still technically minded would see that the things presented are actually viable. They would know some of the science behind it that I might not go into a lot of detail. Now, why is this important? It's important because there seems to be this tension between science and Christianity. Whether you believe in God as a Christian or don't believe in God as an atheist, there's a perception that what we've learned in science disagrees with what we've learned in the Bible. A lawyer once came to Jesus and asked, "What's the greatest commandment of all? Out of everything God has commanded humans to do, what's the greatest?" And Jesus said that you should love the Lord your God with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your heart and with all your mind. And I'm glad he said to love God with your mind. You don't have to not think to be a Christian. In fact, you should be able to ask tough questions and get reasonable answers. How does science fit in with the Bible? For me to love God with my mind, I have to be able to ask those kinds of questions and expect reasonable answers. And so one of my purposes in this book is to answer that question, to give us the freedom to love God with our minds as we investigate how these two things seamlessly mesh together.